All right, welcome everyone. We will go ahead and get started. Thank you to everyone for being here this morning. I appreciate you being here. And we are going to talk about how to make finals easier and more responsive with Canvas. My name is CJ Shields, and I am a instructional consultant at the Center for Teaching Excellence, and I will be leading this session today. So feel free to introduce yourself in the chat or tell me a little bit about your role and what you do. That will help kind of guide the session, customize the session a little bit as we work through some of the items that we're going to discuss today. So I will pause here for just a second. I will share a link in the chat as well. But if you want to let me know what your role with Canvas is here at A&M, that would be great. And thank you to everyone for participating in the poll. Looks like we have mostly instructional designers. We have also some sub-account admins and academic liaisons. Okay, so this is going to look a little bit different for everyone, but that's why we're here today. So our learning objectives for today, we are going to apply best practices before wide-scale deployment of Respondus Lockdown Browser or Respondus Monitor. We're going to analyze the difference between classic quizzes and new quizzes and determine the best option for a situation. And then we're going to evaluate some other Canvas tools that can be used to assist in meeting traditional and non-traditional goals for assessment. So that's what we're going to do today over the next 45 minutes to an hour, depending on how many questions there are and that sort of thing. The length of the session may vary a little bit, but we will definitely wrap up by noon, as I want to be aware of everyone's time. But when you leave here today, near the end of the session, I will share a link to the slide deck that I am showing during the presentation. I will also share the resource guide, and it looks like this. In fact, I'll share that here in just a moment. This has a number of links. Virtually everything that I'm going to talk about in the session today will be covered in one of these links right here. So the presentation is there as well. And you can see, based on all the topics, we have the resources here, and then we have where it came from. I have made a few notes, as some of them are A&M resources, but they've been updated more recently by Instructure. And so I've made some notes of that. As we move through everything here, you feel free to ask any questions about this, but let me grab the shareable link for that, and I will share it in the chat as well right now. So we're going to start with Respondus, an overview of Respondus. We'll compare the Lockdown Browser and Monitor, and we'll look at best practices for utilizing Respondus. So first of all, have you used Respondus before? I'm curious as to everyone's experience with Respondus. Have you utilized Respondus before? So 75% said no. That's good. So Respondus, a little bit of an overview of Respondus here. It is the only university-wide, what we call enterprise tool that is used for proctoring. It actually consists of two tools in one. There is the Lockdown Browser and there is Lockdown Monitor. And I'll get into the difference of those in the next few slides and demo that as well. In full disclosure, Respondus did experience a number of issues, as Hillary alluded to, in March. There is a team from across the university that is working on resolving those issues. They have mostly been resolved, but we have still seen some crop up as recently as the last day or two. Again, in full disclosure, Respondus is a tool and it works well in many cases. The issues we saw were less than 1% of exams that it was used in. That can be very frustrating, though, for an instructor if you're in that 1%. It is very difficult to create something that works on every device. We know that students bring a multitude of devices to classes, from tablets to laptops, and the age of those varies. And so having a tool that works universal on all of those is very difficult. And it's very likely there's always going to be a handful of students that will not be able to correctly utilize Respondus. We see this especially in the really large classes, where instructors will often take a handful of paper copies even to a test, because they know that there will be a few students who will not be able to get in for their device. We have an excellent support team here at A&M that is compiling all of the Respondus issues and is spearheading our effort to figure out what the issues are. So if you do experience an issue with Respondus, you can contact support@instructure.com, and that will get the ball rolling. And that actually sends the support ticket to Canvas, but they'll kick it to our support team because they'll recognize it's from A&M, and they'll kick it back, and our support team will start working on it, and they will identify your issues and start working with you on those. So I'm not on that team, but I work with them a lot in resolving these sort of issues. So they're great at what they do, and they will get those issues back to you. So if you have any issues, this is who you should contact, support@instructure.com. I see there's a question in the chat. Does only enterprise university-wide mean tools like HonorLock are not? Yes, that is correct. Hillary, great question. HonorLock is currently only active with those units that have a memorandum of understanding for distance ed, and that consists of a handful of programs. So correct, HonorLock is not available university-wide. It's only for those programs that have the memorandum of understanding for distance learning. So great question. We get that one a lot. And I know people have had good and bad experiences with HonorLock in the past, and same with Respondus, and some have a preferred tool. So comparing Respondus Lockdown Browser and Monitor, the type of proctoring, Lockdown Browser, it is restriction of software on the computer. So if I'm utilizing the Lockdown Browser, I can open my exam on Canvas or perhaps another third-party tool, and I can't go anywhere else. I can't open another tab. I can't open in the browser, another browser. I can't navigate any place other than to that exam until I'm finished. Once I hit submit, then it closes, and I can use my computer as I normally would. Respondus Monitor takes that to the next level. It records and reviews students as they are taking an exam. So for example, if I'm taking an exam, my browser is now locked, but I also have to have a webcam, and it has to be turned on, and the software is going to monitor me while I'm taking the exam. And it will flag inconsistencies. So if I start talking, or if I get up and move around, it's going to flag that. There is some AI involved. The instructor will receive notification of an issue, and they will have to go back and manually review that. The AI obviously can't determine if the student is cheating or not, right? Just because they looked away doesn't mean they were cheating, but it will tell you there were inconsistencies for this student, and you can go back and look at those. And both of them require an exam in the LMS. So we have to have an exam in the LMS in order to use either one of these tools, and I'm going to guide you through how to use these. So if we look at Canvas, and at this point I'm going to navigate over to Canvas, and I'm going to toggle back and forth between the slide deck and between Canvas. The first thing you'll notice is this huge pop-up in the lower right-hand corner that encourages you to update your Respondus, and this is part of our response to the Respondus issues. It has instructions and then also a link right here in which I can click, and it will give me the option for how to run the various updates. So if that pops up, I know it's tempting to just click this don't show again every time you get one of these pop-up messages, but this does have some useful information, and we have found that those who have run this update will in fact experience fewer issues with Respondus. So that is an important pop-up that comes up, and if I close it, as soon as I open Canvas, it will pop up again. So as long as I don't select that don't show in the future, I will continue to get this. Now, in order to create a quiz, which is what we'll have to have for either Respondus Monitor or Respondus Lockdown Browser, we'll do that through Canvas. And just as a preface, the scope of how to create an entire quiz from scratch, and question banks and item banks and all that sort of thing is really beyond the scope of this session. I'd be happy to show anyone through a consultation how to do that, but in the interest of time, I won't do that today. I will just jump right in and kind of show you where the quizzes are and maybe create like a one-question quiz. But I'm going to jump into my practice course right here. I see someone in the chat, Deanna, thank you. Click the don't show today. I can get the contents of that message and send it to you if you need to, Deanna. That's not a problem. We can arrange that. So in order to create a quiz, I'm going to navigate to quizzes in Canvas, and then I am going to select the plus quiz button. And you may get this pop up. If you don't, that's okay. We'll talk about this later on. And you can choose if you want to create a quiz from the new quiz feature or the classic quiz feature. I'm going to utilize the classic quiz feature. For Respondus, it does not matter. You can choose either one. And then I'm going to select submit. And then I'll give this quiz a name. I'll just call it April 4th example. And then in this space right here, which is called the rich content editor, I would provide any instructions or overview for the quiz. I would make sure it's a graded quiz. It does help if you show one question at a time, that if possible. that does tend to reduce the Respondus issues if you show one question at a time. I'm not sure exactly why, but it does. And then you're going to assign a due date for this quiz. So let's just say tomorrow. And available from is when students can first view that quiz. And available until is when they can submit it, the date they can submit it, at the last possible date they can submit. So it can be the due date, but it can also be something later if you want to allow late submissions. In this case, I'm not going to allow late submissions, so I'll make the due date and the until the exact same. Excuse me. And then I would navigate to questions. And again, creating an entire quiz is beyond the scope of this session, but I will just create one question here, and I'll make it a multiple choice question. I'll put all the choices in. And then I'll select April 4th as the correct answer. And I'll hit update question, and then I will save this exam. So obviously the exam can be as extensive as you want it to be. It can be lengthy, it can be not as lengthy, but you need to create a quiz in Canvas in order for the lockdown browser to work. So we create the lockdown browser, or we create the quiz, and we show one question at a time. That is one of the options, is to show one question at a time. That does tend to increase the likelihood that Respondus will work correctly. We talked about the due date feature as well. And now we're going to place the quiz in a module, which I'll talk about briefly, and then we'll enable Respondus. Laura has a great question. Do classic or new quizzes work better with Respondus, or are they about the same? They are about the same, assuming students are on a laptop. We have seen some issues with new quizzes and iPads and Respondus. So but in general, they function mostly the same. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on when we get to comparing the two as well. But great question, Laura. In general, about the same. Although I'll say this later on, if there's a question about which quiz tool to use, I always default to classic quizzes, just because it's older, it's more established, it's been around for years, and it just sometimes the tools like that tend to have fewer glitches. So if anybody has a doubt, I always say default to classic. New is okay, but I default to classic if I have a question. And then once you've created your quiz through the quizzes index, it's always good practice to place it in a module. You can see here I have an example already set up that I'm going to use. And to do that, you would simply select the plus button and then choose quiz, and then locate the quiz and place it in the module. And once the quiz is in the module, that way you can determine if it's going to be published or unpublished to students, and you can just publish it whenever you're ready. In this case, it's already been published. But if I didn't want students to see that yet, then I could leave that unpublished. But I have my quiz created. I have it placed in a module. Now I need to go and enable Respondus so that I can use Respondus for this particular quiz. And to do that, I'm going to navigate to settings in the course navigation, which is over here in the lower left-hand corner. And then I'm going to work my way to the navigation tab at the top of the page. And from there, I'm going to find Lockdown Browser. Now, most likely, it's going to be down here for you if you have not used it before. It will be something that's hidden from students. You can make it active for students in one of two ways. You can drag it up here, just drag and drop where you want it to appear, or you can select the three dots and choose, I'll choose disable first because I need to disable it so it actually appears down here. And then I would put the three dots and enable again to enable it on the top. Anything that's at the top is active and visible for students. Anything at the bottom is always accessible for an instructor, but it's not visible to students. And then I would click save. This is a really important one. This is one of the few pages in Canvas that does not save automatically. So just make sure you save. I can't tell you how many times I've switched something there and had to go back and change it because I didn't save. And you'll know that it's visible because in the course navigation, now you will see the eyeball with a line through it, meaning it's hidden, is not next to Lockdown Browser. So it is fully functional at this point. And from there, I'm going to select Lockdown Browser. And once the Lockdown Browser has been selected, I will see every quiz in the course. And you can see here's the April 4th example that I created. You can see I've had a few demos in the past where I've required Respondus. I have a bunch of them where it's not required as well. But obviously, we're going to talk about Respondus, so I'm going to enable this. So on the April 4th example, if I select the down arrow and I can go to settings, I have two options: don't require Respondus or require Respondus. Obviously, I want to require Respondus, so I'm going to do that. And then I come up with a number of options. But I'm actually going to skip this first one and jump down here, because notice right away, you have two options. Don't require proctoring for this exam, which is a bit confusing, and then require Respondus monitoring. And that turns on the Respondus monitor, or you can allow the instructor live proctoring via Zoom or Teams. That's one we don't see a lot. I know there are a few instructors that do that, but we tend to see that one the least. So if I just leave this checked as it is, I'm in the lockdown browser. So the students can take the exam, but they can't leave the browser. They can't open a tab, search Google, they can't get on ChatGPT or Bing or whatever, and they can't do that. So I can assign a password if I want to. I can click on the advanced settings, and I can choose other various options here. Example, for a STEM class, I may want to enable a calculator. You can also allow a specific web domain. So if there's a certain site students would need to use, you can allow them to navigate to that site. And then, again, various options you can select from there. So, and then I would hit save and close. And that would allow me to, now that Respondus is required, notice proctoring is not required. So I've enabled the lockdown browser for that particular exam. And then if I navigate back to settings, now I can turn on the option to require Respondus monitor right here. And it's popping up and telling me that, this feature is going to involve the webcam and there are resources for the instructor. So you can leave that message or not show it again, whatever you want to do. I leave it up for demonstration purposes. And then I'm going to enter the actual settings. So I can choose when students start the exam, what do they have to do? Anything that is checked as it is right now, the students would have to complete. So you can see here, there are additional instructions. It gives you a preview of those. If you want to edit the text there, you can select edit text, and you can change that to match whatever instructions you're going to provide the students. You can also restore the default at any time. And then guidelines and tips. It tells you to avoid rooms where children are present, turn off the TV, run the webcam check, just a variety of things that students should do in order to have the best possible experience and avoid being flagged as a potential inconsistency in the exam. You can require students to have a photo. So they have to upload a photo. Again, obviously they have a camera. I'm not going to turn my camera on right now since I'm doing the presentation. But you can also have them show an ID, like their Aggie ID card or a government issued ID. And then you can do an environment check where it scans to kind of determine the baseline for what the sound and light and those things are in the room. So if a student gets up and moves or whatever, then they know how, the AI knows how to determine if there's been a change in the environment. You can also do, and then facial detection is required. But you can turn the various options off here, where students would get a notification if their face can't be seen. So they'll get a pop-up, hey, your face is not hearing what's happening with the exam. And again, you can choose the various options that you would like, and then you would hit save and close. And it'll take a minute to save that. And then notice now that Respondus monitor is required for this exam. So I went over a lot there in a short amount of time, I think. So I want to just do kind of a really quick recap. The first thing I did was I navigated to quizzes. And from there, I created a quiz. Again, which creating a quiz is beyond the scope of this. So I just created a very simple quiz with one question. I select the plus quiz button to do that. And then from there, the second step was to navigate to settings. And from settings, I navigated to navigation. And then I ensured that Lockdown Browser was in the top portion of the screen, not in the bottom. Anything that's at the bottom with the italicized font will not be shown to students. And then in the course navigation, I navigated the Lockdown browser and I found the exam and I played around with the settings to get what I wanted to do. And then once the exam is taken, I can review the class results and the exam statistics, and I can view those results for the class once the exam has been completed. And I know I have one of these, I think it's this one, where I have class results to take a look at. So you can see here that I have this individual has kind of a high priority because this was intentionally done. So they moved around so I could see the various issues with the exam and how long they were occurring for and what had happened there. So again, I would have to go in and review that. It doesn't take points off automatically or anything. It just flags it as something that I, as the instructor, would want to be aware of. A couple of other tips for using Respondus, and that includes the fact that students will obviously need to have Respondus on their device to begin with. So it is very important that the students have navigated to Respondus and they have downloaded the appropriate app or a Chrome extension so that they have Respondus ready to go. And we already did all these things, so I'll skip through this. And it's also best that the first use of Respondus is always a low stakes or a dummy assessment. So if you have an assessment worth 2 or 3 points, some sort of daily check, that would be a great place to start with Respondus. I even see a lot of instructors who will create an assignment worth 0 points, a quiz worth 0 points, and they will use that to test Respondus. But you don't want the first utilization of Respondus to be a high stakes assessment for finals. So that's why we did this session a little bit in advance of finals. If you are planning to use Respondus for finals and you want to try it for the first time, I would strongly encourage you to try something low stakes or a dummy assessment with your students in the next week or two so that you can get a feeling for how it's going to work before a wide scale deployment. If possible, try to avoid large images. Canvas quiz questions do allow you to upload images. We have found that the very large images will sometimes cause issues with Respondus. So if you can avoid those, that's good. And then even in the best case scenario, there will likely be a few issues with Respondus where a student can't get in, their device is too old, it's not been updated, updates are pending, whatever. Those things can cause issues. So if the first time you utilize Respondus is through a low stakes exam and the students have updated their computer and have downloaded Respondus, it'll probably be a very good experience. You'll probably still have 1 or 2, maybe they can't get in, but for the most part, the students will be able to get in and you'll have a good baseline for how Respondus is going to work with a larger exam. Yes, some very good questions in the chat. Scott says he's hoping to use Respondus to give exams in the classroom so that I can use Canvas, but I will be there given that. Am I correct that I will only? Yes, if you, again, obviously entirely up to the instructor, but generally, Scott, what we say is if the instructor is going to be there monitoring the class as well, then Lockdown Browser is all you need. Monitor tends to be more for remote situations where students can take the exam asynchronously or outside of class. Obviously, there are exceptions to those rules, but typically that's what we recommend as the best practice. Hopefully that answers your question. And then Suraball, I apologize if I mispronounce your name. It refers to large file size, not to dimension so much as to large file size. And then Laura, let me get the link to share that with you. And I also shared the link in the link for the presentation, that is, in the chat again, and it should be the correct one this time. And so on lms.tamu.edu, which contains everything about the LMS and Canvas, if you navigate to tools, there are actually 3 Respondus tools. The only one you need to worry about is the Lockdown Browser. And it runs through a number of the things we just talked about, but this link right here is the link students will need to go to navigate the download. So it's actually right here. It's actually the same one that the instructor update that is shown in Canvas is for. So if you have that pop-up that's appearing in Canvas, it's actually the exact same site, but I'll share it right here as well in case anyone wants to copy and paste that. And I'll also share the parent page of that, which is right here. I think it's also on the resource document, but in case it's not, there it is as well. Okay, awesome. Great questions. Anything else? Okay. And again, another quiz question or another interactive question here. If you have a second and wouldn't mind participating, that would be great. You can also do that from the chat, or you can also do it from the QR code on the screen, or I'm sharing in the chat right here as well. I'm just curious, if you are using Canvas quizzes, which is your preferred Canvas quiz tool? And again, we'll dive into this a little bit more here in a few minutes. But if you would take about 30 seconds to answer that question, that'd be awesome. Okay, so about 60% prefer Classic, and then 20% have no preference, and 20% hoping to determine based on this session. All right, so there is, here's a very brief comparison of the new and Classic quiz tool. So a little bit of background, I won't give the full story, but Canvas actually started the Classic quiz tool started when Canvas started in about 2009, and has been there ever since. So it's about a 15-year-old tool, very well proven. The new quiz tool started about 6 years ago, and it was slated to become the official quiz tool this fall, but obviously that did not happen. That has been pushed back. They've done away with the deadline, and they said they're going to run both tools side by side. That said, Canvas is strongly encouraging institutions to move to new quizzes, but new quizzes still does not have the complete functionality of Classic quizzes, and that's why we tell people to default to Classic quizzes if they have a choice, or if they're looking for an option. That said, there are some features of new quizzes that a lot of faculty like, and they have embraced new quizzes, and that's fine. And it works well for them, and that's great. We do know that some of our other R1 institution peers have told individuals, if they're deciding right now not to use new quizzes for at least 6 months. We have not taken that stance, but we're certainly happy to help with either and provide information that will make it useful for everyone. As part of that, this is on the resource document, but I do want to share it here. This is a full comparison of new and Classic quizzes. It is the most recent one put out by Canvas. Our office has one, but in all honesty, it's not as up to date because Canvas is changing this pretty regularly. But here are some of the biggest ones that we have questions about. They're both compatible with Respondus. New quizzes does not allow partial points for the options shown here: multiple choice, fill in the blank, ordering and categorization. I'm not sure why I abbreviated multiple choice when I made this, so I apologize for that. Both of them allow you to download a CSV of the quiz and the item analysis. New quizzes does not allow you to download a CSV of the student analysis, and that is a hang up for a lot of people and why they don't want to embrace new quizzes yet, and I understand that. Enhanced question types, such as things as hotspot, ordering, stimulus, where they're much more interactive, where students are manipulating something on a screen. Those are not enabled in Classic quizzes. They are in new quizzes. And again, the full scope of this is beyond the 23 minutes that I have left here, but I'm happy to meet with you individually or have one of our other consultants meet with you if you have more questions on this. This is a very broad overview, like a 10,000-foot overview of new and Classic quizzes. If you decide to start in Classic, you will be able to migrate to new at any point. So that's always a fear of someone who's starting brand new. Like if I start in new and in 6 months Canvas says, hey, everybody has to go to, or if I start in Classic and in 6 months Canvas says, hey, everybody's going to be in new in 3 months, will my quizzes be lost? Absolutely not. There is a tool and a way to migrate those into new quizzes, and it's pretty efficient and works very smoothly. So just be aware that you can move back. You can move forward. You can't move backwards. Obviously, you can't go from a new quiz to a Classic quiz, though. And if you have questions, which tool, please default to the Classic quizzes, as it does tend to be a little bit more tried and true in terms of what's been established. And again, an overview of the two is beyond the scope of this, but I'm going to provide a very basic overview, high-level overview, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. And I'm going to do that by taking a look at the interface within Canvas. So if I navigate back to my course and I select quizzes in the course navigation, I can select plus quiz. You should get this pop-up menu, but if you don't, I'll show you how to change that. So I'm just going to do this real quick. Start a classic quiz. So classic quiz, you already saw me create one earlier very quickly. It looks like much of the rest of Canvas. I have a number of options I can run through. And again, those are the things that are kind of beyond the scope of this, but I'd be happy to touch base if you want to. You can require passwords. You can add a number of options right here. You can shuffle answers, allow multiple attempts. The main difference is how you build questions. So in the classic quiz, these are the question types that I have. Very standard question types, very useful question types. Obviously, many of these are self-graded. Essay questions clearly are not, but any of the others are self-graded, and also you can allow partial points. So let's say I have multiple answers, and there are 5 possible answers, and students need to select 3 of them. And let's say that I, as a student, only select 1, I would get 1/3 of the possible points. New Quizzes does not allow that. It's either all right or all wrong. And I have the full rich content editor here where I can add videos and picture and all that. Again, keeping in mind if you want to use Respondus that you're going to have possibly some issues if you use a large image, if you upload a large image. So the interface is classic, and you can add and edit quizzes in a variety of different ways. And when you're done, of course, you would click Save. I'll cancel out of this one. And if I go back to quizzes, so notice now, if I create a plus quiz, it's going to take me automatically to the classic quiz. So if you're not getting that pop-up menu that I showed a minute ago, you can select the 3 dots and you can select Reset Quiz Engine Choice. And then it'll just reload your screen, but now this will come back. So every time I select plus quiz, I will get this option for a classic or a new quiz. As long as you don't select remember this choice as my default, then you're not going to have to worry about resetting that. But now I'll take a look at new quiz. And this is very different. So the first screen, all I see is the quiz name, and I can assign it to an assignment group and display the points and choose the due date. And then I have the option save or build. In this case, I want build because build is going to take me into the interface where I can construct the quiz. And so now notice it's different. It takes up the entire screen for the most part. In technical speak, it's because it's technically not a part of Canvas. It's what's called an LTI, which is Learning Tool Interoperability. There will not be a quiz on that later. But it basically means that it's being developed outside of Canvas and run through Canvas. And there are some technical reasons for that, and that's why it functions differently. But I have this pop out right here, and it allows me to see everything I've done in the quiz. But I create the quiz questions in this way by clicking this blue button, and I have various options here, many of which are the same. Multiple choice, multiple choice is a multiple choice question, no matter how you do it, right? And then true, false, same thing. But there are some here that are not present in the classic quiz option. So for example, ordering is one. So I could have like key dates or, landmark decisions or something, and I can move those around. So I would type this out like most recent, and then, farthest in the past and most recent, and then I could have these, and students would have to order them, and they'd have to drag and drop them on their screen. So a little bit more interactive. There also is the option for a stimulus, which is not a question type per se, but it allows you to have something on the left side of the screen and questions on the right. So that something could be a passage that students read, it could be a video they watch, it could be something audio they listen to. But I would add that stimulus content right here, and then the students would have that information. They would answer a quiz question on the right. So that's something you can't do with a classic quiz. And another one is a hotspot question in which I upload an image and students have to identify something on that image. Now, some of these are useful, some of them are not. So if you don't find those useful, then again, classic quizzes may be your tool that you want to go with. Another difference I didn't talk about when I talked about classic quizzes. So they have different banking systems. Classic quizzes has what's called question banks, and those are tied to the course. So if I create a question bank, those are tied to that course. I can use them over and over again whenever I import them from year to year. New Quiz has item banks that are tied to the user. So I can use those items in any class that I am an instructor for, which is both good and can be problematic if it's shared with the wrong person and they edit the quiz questions, which we see from time to time. That can cause problems. The settings, which are the exact same as they are in classic quizzes, but they're just shown in a different place. They're at the top. I select the settings tab right here, and I can choose to do things like set a time limit, which I can do in classic quizzes. It just looks different how I do it here. I can set the option for one quiz at a time. And then again, here are the reports that I can generate. In new quizzes, I see them here. In classic quizzes, I don't see them until students have taken the exam, and then it shows up as an option on the right side of the screen. And then either one I can moderate, which means that I can give students additional time. I can give them additional attempts. The benefit for new quizzes is that if a student has an accommodation and they need, for example, time and a half, if I use new quizzes and I enter that once, it saves for the entire semester. In classic quizzes, I have to do that every single quiz that I utilize Canvas. I have to go in and I have to give that student their accommodation. So new quizzes, very much a time saver in that way. And then again, you can run exports for this, the same as you can for classic quizzes as well. So that is a very quick overview of the two quiz tools. And we covered both classic and new quizzes. And again, I'm happy to walk through the specifics. This is just a really high level overview of the difference in the two quiz tools. We covered all of those. Just aware, whichever tool you choose, it's always best to place it in a module. That gives you the ability to ensure that students will receive the quiz at the time you want them to. So once mine loads here, notice that my quizzes index is hidden from students right here. Obviously, this is a demo course, so students are people in the office, but nonetheless, it's hidden. And I deliver everything through modules so that I can assure that the students get the quiz when I want them to. If I leave the quizzes index open, students can navigate there, and if I've accidentally put the wrong date or something, they can get to the quiz. Whereas if I put it through modules, I can really control that with the publication of both the module and the quiz itself. And with that, I'm going to pause for a second and see if there are any questions in the chat. Yes, Hillary, great question. When you can change from classic to new, but not vice versa, that is for an individual quiz, not for your default preference. You can always change your default preference by going back to the quizzes index and then selecting those three dots. It won't be there right now. Oh, yes, it will be. Reset quiz engine choice. I didn't think I'd select it again, but I can do that, and it will flash and reload, and then my quiz choice has been reset. Any other questions regarding new or classic quizzes? But you can see here, any of my classic quizzes, which you know are classic because the rocket ship is not filled in, and if it's a new quiz, it's colored in or filled in. But I can select the three dots and I can select migrate. So any classic quiz, I have the option to migrate it to a new quiz, whereas obviously in a new quiz, I'm not going to have that option. While I'm here, another feature that is useful is notice that you cannot duplicate a classic quiz. However, you can duplicate a new quiz. So if for whatever reason you need to duplicate a lot of quizzes, like if you use the same format over and over, but just need to change the questions, then again, maybe new quiz is the tool for you. Okay, that is the end of the classic quiz and new quiz overview section. And I'm definitely running behind here. So I'm just going to talk about these features real quick and just to put them on your radar. And again, if you have questions, I'll be happy to meet with you and show you more about these tools. But I just want to put them out here. We have features and tools that can be useful for some of them for traditional and some of them for non-traditional uses of assessment with final exams. If they are enterprise, I'm going to talk only today about enterprise, which are university-wide tools. There are some which we classify as third-party tools. Those vary by college and department, so it's very possible you'll see tools other than the ones that I'm going to show you here this morning. one of the features in Canvas that I just want to make everyone aware of, if you're not already, is that when you create an assignment, you can differentiate that assignment by providing students with multiple options for submission. So when you select online, you can choose all of these options. So you could have students, depending on if it's some sort of like a final project instead of a final exam, for example, they could create a website, they could do a video recording, they could upload a file, like a PowerPoint presentation or something. But you can create lots of different options for students to submit for those projects that might be more open-ended, where a student just has to convey what they've learned in a method of their choosing. You can set that up very easily within Canvas. So there are lots of options for doing that. Collaborations is a tool within Canvas that allows groups to collaborate. So when you create a group in Canvas, if you have not done that before, you do that through the People tab. And if I can find the People tab, there it is. When you utilize the People tab and you create groups, the groups will show as a tab at the top. And then for each group, you can select the 3 dots. You can visit the home page, and there's an option called Collaborations. And you can start a collaboration either by Google Doc or Microsoft Office 365, and it will create a blank document that goes to every student in the group. And the advantage of this is if you, as the instructor, would like to provide frequent feedback, you also are an owner on the document. So you can just come in through collaborations and you can provide feedback. It's a great feature. It is a little cumbersome because you have to visit every group in the course in order to do that. So really large courses, probably not an option, but smaller courses can be a really good option for providing feedback and very timely input for a group of students who might be working on a group project. GradeScope. GradeScope is fantastic. If you are not familiar with GradeScope, basically what it is, it's a Scantron sheet and they give you a bubble sheet template, and the students write their UIN on the template, and AI will be used to match the student to their UIN. And we've done things in the office, we've tested where a student wrote the wrong name. So for example, I go by CJ, but I wrote Charles on there, and then I put my UIN, it was still able to recognize that. And then the grades are recorded via GradeScope in Canvas. So what I do is I print off this bubble sheet, I have the students take their exam, and then I collect all the bubble sheets, I scan them using the scanner in my office and upload that file, and GradeScope will grade all the bubble sheets and then put the grades in Canvas. It's amazing and fantastic and so much more efficient than Scantrons. So GradeScope is one that I encourage everyone, if you're using Scantrons, to look into. It's in Canvas right here. And you can then work through, and it will guide you through how to create various assignments. You can actually also do coding assignments and quizzes as well. But let's just say that you wanted to create the bubble exam sheet, then you just simply walk through and create the bubble exam from that way. So and I think this is one of the examples I have. Nope, that's not one. And that's, I apologize. Get out of here. There we go. And so that GradeScope allows you to do that. And it is for in-person exams only. So if you prefer giving in-person exams, but you want your grades in Canvas, or you just don't want to use the Scantron and have it be a little bit more efficient, GradeScope is a great tool for that. Thank you, Chris. I'm glad you found GradeScope useful. It's an amazing tool. Another one is Perceptive. This is great for group work and collaboration and evaluation. Students provide feedback, oops, typo there, I'm sorry, based on a rubric, not basis, based on a rubric. And then the original submitter can rate the quality of the reviewer's feedback. So let's say that I provide feedback to a student. That student then is going to rate how good my feedback was. So I can't just put in kind of junk comments, because then it's going to reflect on my grade as well. So Perceptive is a very good tool for that. It is also built in through Canvas. So this comes in handy for group work, group presentations, where a lot of feedback is required for students. and from their peers. But that is also a tool that is in Canvas as well. And again, all of these, I'm running out of time here, but I want to make a note in the resource document that I shared with you. I have resources for all of these that go into in-depth discussion and overview of these various tools and how to use them. And then the last thing, I believe is the last thing, is perusal. This is social learning. This one might not be as much for an exam, but possibly. Students can provide comments and feedback, and grades are determined by AI, with the instructor providing the input for how you get a certain score on the rubric. But this could be useful for maybe a non-traditional sort of assessment where there's a lot of analysis required. I've also seen instructors use it at the end of the semester for students to give feedback to the instructor outside of the APHIS system, where maybe they want more conversational feedback. This can also be a place for that. So Perusal does have some interesting features as well that might be worth considering. And again, all of these are available in Canvas. If you're not seeing any of them, you should be able to navigate to settings and then turn them on through navigation right here. If they're not there for some reason, contact support and they'll be happy to help you and figure out what's going on. And so just as a quick wrap up here, I want to give everybody time to finish. We talked about Respondus. We explored the 2 Canvas quiz types, and we also looked at tools for traditional and non-traditional assessment. And then the resource document, which I will share again right now, has links to everything, including the presentation and including resources for everything that we just talked and discussed. Everything is shown there. And thank you for your time. And please let me know what I can do to assist as you continue working with Canvas and setting up your final exams.